The larger the vehicle, the heavier the vehicle, the more impressive it is when any sporting dynamics come through the driving experience. It's why the Aston Martin DBX 707, Audi RS6, and Lucid Air Sapphire are so impressive. It's also why we don't expect small cars from Lotus to have massage seats or automatic parking. That too would be impressive, but it's not what we want, right? So the question then becomes, do we want the new G80 to give up luxury in favor of quicker lap times around the neighborhood? So mid-sized luxury sedans, right? Think Mercedes E-Class, BMW 5 Series, or Genesis G80. This is the updated 2025 model year. I'm driving the top trim with the 3.5 liter twin turbo V6 under the hood, 375 horsepower, 391 pound-feet of torque. We're gonna just start with a launch control because unlike BMW and Mercedes, Genesis doesn't have an AMG, they don't have an M, so they have to blur sporting characteristics, I don't know how else better to say that, and luxury. And for the longest time, Genesis has been skewed totally towards luxury. They've left Hyundai N to do their sporting goods stuff. But we still have a ton of drive modes here, and with the Sport Plus trim here in Canada, or the Sport Prestige for you guys in the States, we do have Sport Plus mode, driving mode, and if we turn off traction control, we have launch control. Left foot on the brake, right foot on the gas. Takes a second to get going. It's definitely adding in a little bit of a kick on the upshifts. It's notably artificial feeling, the kick. In soft mode, comfort mode, it's a little bit smoother to shift, especially around town. But this V6 is a great reason to consider this a full-on luxury vehicle. It's paired with an 8-speed auto here, and when you begin pushing the car, it's not as crisp as the ZF 8-speed in the 5 Series. It still does everything really well. You can use the paddles to shift gears. The response is good. Overall, I mean, the engine's so torquey, it's so smooth. We can change, obviously, our drive mode. We do have 2 brake settings, comfort or sport. I tend to leave it in comfort. Yeah, I prefer to drive it either in comfort or sport, at least for the engine setting. I can go in and choose my mode, which will customize things like the steering weight, which we'll get into a little bit later. Now, separately, you can change the active sound design here. This is the loudest setting, and it's not offensive, but it's loud. This engine doesn't sound particularly good. The E450, of course, has a 3-liter inline 6 turbo. Same with the BMW 5 Series. Both those engines definitely sound a lot better, but in torque delivery, power delivery, I wouldn't give those engines an edge. Perhaps they have a little bit more of a rewarding top end to them, but this engine paired with the 8-speed, it's super torquey. And if you guys remember, I drove the GV80. The G90 also has this. It's an electronic supercharger with this same engine to aid in torque fill and just to get the turbos to spool up a little bit quicker. Now, this doesn't need it. It's perfectly capable of carrying its own weight. And the weight here is substantial. It's surprising that this powertrain is so simple compared to that E-supercharged V6, right? This weighs 4,600 pounds. Why? Where is all that weight? When you compare it to the E-Class, which has a mild hybrid system, I just don't know where this weight's coming from. If what you're after is the smoothest possible stop and go experience, those mild hybrid setups in the E450 and 540i do have a clear edge. But somehow they're both over 250 pounds lighter and quicker in a straight line because of it. Despite this, it's abundantly clear with this update that Genesis wants you to know the G80 won't pull a Rolls-Royce on you and fall apart in the corners. They've updated the bumpers and headlights, distancing the sport trims with an even more aggressive look, backing it up with aggressive brakes and an adaptive suspension system that will read the road in front of you to give you the best ride comfort possible. But they also make a point to make sure you know it's sport tuned in this top trim. So, adaptive suspension. It's really smooth here. I mean, this is through and through a luxury vehicle. Combine that with the the noticeable lack of road noise, which is kind of funny when you notice the lack of something. Sport tuned, like I mentioned here, so compared to the E450, it doesn't have quite the level of ride comfort that that vehicle has now. As a trade-off, on the other hand, straight up, this is a way more fun vehicle to drive than the E450. So with the top trims, you also get rear steering, and on the surface, that's like, okay, well, is that going to better aid the luxury side of the G80, or, as we dip it into a corner here, the agility of the car? Well, it actually perfectly successfully does both. So, of course, at lower speeds, the rear wheels will steer in the opposite direction of the fronts to cut down the turning radius, which it does. It is an incredibly maneuverable car around parking lots and driveways at low speeds, especially considering how massive it is. But also at high speeds, it doesn't feel strange. You know, at low speeds, when I first got in this car, just around the neighborhood, I'm talking 10, 15 kilometers an hour, and I went to steer the car. Immediately, I was like, oh, this has got a variable ratio power steering rack, which it does. But it just felt like super video game, super artificial and strange. I'm like, there has to be something else going on here. Yeah, it's the rear steer, and it works great. In addition to that, and this is the most important part of the top tier trim here, you get an electronically controlled LSD in the back, which a few years ago, the G80 did not have. So a total level of confidence pulling out of corners. Of course, all G80s are all-wheel drive, but at the same time, there's just that extra layer of, whether it be in the rain or even aggressively pulling out of a corner, you get that extra little bit of rotation, and it actually works really well with the rear steer. Now, steering feel, not a ton of feel, still a little bit vague, still a little bit video gamey, but the response is great and it's direct. I will say, I'm sitting a little bit too high. I don't know if it's 1 inch, 2 inches, who knows, but that's one thing that kind of pulls me out of a quick driving scenario, of an engaging driving scenario. Seats are great though. If you stick it in Sport Plus, it will hug you real tight. It doesn't have what the E60 M5 had, which is like those automatically adjustable bolsters that would, like, right here, we're turning right, it would like squeeze the left side to keep you in place. It doesn't have that, but great adjustability on the seats here. For instance, if I put my hand down here and just hover over the seat controls, a little prompt comes up on the screen showing which adjustment I'm going to change, or I'm about to change. What a great feature. No one asked for that, but it's just something Genesis came up with. We have soft closed doors. We've got the Alcantara headliner. So, as I mentioned earlier, the front bumper has been redesigned. It's very slight. If you compare the 2024 model to the 2025 model, it's very subtle, and the grille's a little bit bigger on all the G80 models, although it's still ruined by two things. One, our front license plate law here in BC destroys the front end, but also the radar cruise block in the center there. They try to hide it with the same pattern as the grille, but my eye goes to it every single time. It just, without those two things, it would look so much better. One thing I will mention, these 20-inch wheels here you get with the Sport Prestige model, or the Sport Plus as it's called here in Canada. 5-spoke wheel, looks great. I don't love them, don't hate them, but there aren't any other options. The wheel comes with the trim level and that's all you get. So BMW does it better, a ton of wheel options. The E-Class does it better, a ton of wheel options there. So just know, if you get the top tier with the LSD, the rear steer, you have to get these wheels. You're gonna want the rear steer too, not only for handling, but just maneuverability, like I said. This has a longer wheelbase, very slightly, than an E-Class. It is an overall length a little bit longer than the E-Class 2. And while I think it's a great looking car, especially in this matte gray paint color here, the rear end could use a little bit of work. I think it looks a little bit awkward. It does give off kind of old CLS vibes with the sloping back, whereas the E-Class has a more traditional sedan look. I prefer how the E-Class looks from most angles. I think the door handles on the E-Class are better. They kind of sit flush and then come out. Little things like that, but I think Genesis has done a great job, especially with these little details here with the turn signal lights here. The whole thing with a luxury car is that you want to extend the distance between the front axle and the dash here, and I think this kind of pronounces that a little bit more. Just a few years ago, the G80 was very clearly putting out a budget Bentley look outside and in, catering perhaps to your grandparents instead of your parents, but they've since ditched the awkward steering wheel for a much simpler 3-spoke and replaced the wood trim with carbon fiber. So love or hate the carbon, the most important thing to note here is they've taken away all of the wood trim options from the top tier models. The lower specs, the lower tier 2.5 inline 4 models get great options for wood trim, something we don't have in the top tier models here. New for this model year, we have these quilted leather seats. This material here is awesome. The seats have insane adjustability. They've got ergo motion, which is their like massage. Mercedes, Lexus, and Acura all have better massage functionality, I will say, but it's there nonetheless. Like on a long road trip, it's going to be great. It moves around your butt, your back. Allow the Genesis to touch you and you will not be fatigued, okay? And then we have arguably the biggest change for 2025, and that's this 27-inch widescreen display. Now, versus the previous model, the center screen here with all your infotainment, your settings, effectively looks the same as it did before. It's just been extended the whole way across into the gauge cluster. I've always loved the center screen here and just how it works. It's incredibly simple, yet there are still a ton of options. You know, that's what money is supposed to buy you: freedom, options, choices, right? And I hate to say it, the E-Class and the 5 Series, they do that specifically a little bit better. Like, we have ambient lighting here, it's great, but in a Mercedes, it's like 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 in terms of options. It can get a little bit overwhelming, especially in the E-Class if you get that passenger display. It gets crazy. So here I think Genesis has struck a good balance, although there just aren't as many options. With the amount of times sport has been repeated in Genesis brand literature on this vehicle and in the trim levels, you'd think I'd be able to bring up a G meter, even tire pressure, boost, some kind of performance-oriented gauge cluster. I can't really do that. You can change things, but just not as much as I would expect. The Europeans are still doing certain things like that really well, and Genesis just hasn't got quite there. But where they have excelled is the climate control. It is subtly changed here, but not really. Just visually, it looks better. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Thank you, Genesis. These are haptic feedback buttons, but unlike the Infiniti QX80, which was very frustrating to operate, this is really easy. You just touch it and it always works. Heated, ventilated seats here. I can control my rear climate control from here, and you're going to need to, because while the rear seats are heated and the center console flips down, you've got some storage there, cup holders, obviously, your own climate control. If there is somebody sitting in the center seat, you don't have access back there to your heated seat controls, so they would just need to politely ask the driver to turn them on from up here. We do have the moonroof. The heads-up display is only available on the top trim here. A little lack of storage. The center console is laughably small. Wireless charging, 360 cam on this one as well, which is very functional. So there's multiple ways to just interact with a car. It's so easy. It's just a simple vehicle to use, and there's nothing really frustrating about it. So the G80 starts at $74,000 Canadian. For you guys in the States, $58,000. Now, the whole thing with Genesis is they're supposed to undercut a lot of the European competition, the E-Class, the 5 Series, the Audi A6, and they did that to a greater accomplishment years ago. Now, the G80's price has gone up about $8,000 USD over the past, well, 4 years. So base, it is still cheaper than an E-Class, but I'm just gonna cut to the chase. A BMW 550e plug-in hybrid with well over 100 more horsepower, over 120 extra pound-feet of torque over the G80 in top trim, almost fully spec'd out, is within $1,000 of a fully spec'd G80. Up here in Canada, you cannot get the V6 without the sport-tuned suspension or the E-LSD, so it becomes a little bit more expensive. On top of that, you can't get the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder with things like the adaptive suspension. There's only 2 trims here in Canada. In the States, you can get the V6, but with a slightly softer suspension, a little bit more luxurious experience, right? So options are key, and I think Genesis is heading in the right direction. I just really hope they don't overdo it and make the car too stiff in the future and whatnot. But for now, wow, G80, an impressive vehicle. Thanks guys for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you soon.